In the 7th spring, after the river Koros fell silent, Mira Greywing returned to the valley where her family's bones were planted. She came on foot, alone, carrying only a copper-hafted sickle and a pack of salt bread. The road narrowed into shale and briar, then vanished beneath pale grass that hissed at her ankles. Every mile, the sky seemed to lean a little closer, rusting from cobalt to bruise-purple as the dormant moon stirred behind it. People in the lowlands called this the weeks of thinning, a season when the veil between marrow and memory wore sheer. But those who had kin in the bone orchard knew a simpler name, the waiting. She first smelled the orchard before she saw it, a faint sweetness like cut lilac mixed with the iron sting of old blood. Then the trees themselves rose out of the fog, white as bleached coral, ribs and femurs fused into trunks that forked into fingerbone branches. Vertebrae stacked like wooden beads formed graceful boughs, and budding from every joint were luminous blossoms, translucent petals veined with silver, trembling as though they might whisper if the wind dared breathe. Each tree was the shape of the person whose remnants lay within it, yet taller and nobler. Bones recomposed by the orchard's inscrutable will. Mira stopped beneath one that arced like a dancer frozen mid-pirouette. The curve of its spine matched the music in her childhood memories. Her mother, Neris, laughing as she spun Mira around the kitchen. On this tree the petals were a soft periwinkle, and in their depth she swore she could see echoes, reflections of Neris's face, flickering like minnows. "I'm back," Mira said, touching a jawbone knot as though pressing a familiar palm. The tree rang with a faint chime. Somewhere inside its hollow marrow, the spirit of her mother turned in sleep, awaiting the coming eclipse to bloom in full. She would not have lingered long, for danger hemmed every mile of valley, but a man's voice cut through the hush. "Caretakers mustn't stall the petals, girl." An old figure approached, cloak stitched from crow feathers, beard descending in forked grey plaits. The caretaker's staff was tipped with a tibia shard that glowed like dull amber. He leaned on it with the exhaustion of one who had watched too many centuries pass. "You're late, Mira Greywing," he scolded, though his eyes shone warmly. "The blood moon rises tonight." "Elder Caspar?" She bowed. "I had to cross the plateau unseen. Soldiers patrol the ridges." Caspar's face tightened. The occupying empire, new romance coveted every sacred grove now, but none as fiercely as the bone orchard. Rumor said Emperor Halbrek sought the blossoms to distill an elixir that would chain the dead themselves to his banners. An army of obedient ancestors, bound not by loyalty but by alchemy. "The Remans will come," Caspar murmured, "but so will the eclipse. We must finish our grafting before shadow totality, or the trees will bloom unguided, and grief will unroot them." He turned, limping deeper between rows of spectral trunks. Mira followed, boots crunching bone dust that glimmered like frost. They walked until they reached a clearing where a low stone wall circled a sapling barely taller than Mira's waist. Unlike the others, this one was not yet skeletal. It was wrapped in living bark, though strips had begun peeling to reveal pearl-white bone beneath. A single blossom clung at its crown, closed tight as a fist. Caspar bent and traced symbols into the soil. "Your father?" Mira asked. "No," he said. "A child died last winter before her years could fatten. Her family never learned the rites. They begged me to root her here. But she doesn't know the songs yet. You'll teach her." He extended the sickle. The blade's copper edge shimmered as Mira took it. Between the orchard's rows, she felt the surge of generations, uncles, grandmothers, lovers, foes, all sleeping in ivory groves, their dreams rising like sap. The sickle quivered to their pulse. She knelt by the sapling and whispered the first canticle. "Bone to root, memory to fruit, rise and bloom when crimson light crowns night." Each repetition etched the words deeper into the soil. At the third, the bud eased open just a breath, revealing petals the color of sunrise. Caspar nodded, satisfied. But before either could speak, a horn bellowed from the northern pass. Mira's heart lurched. Over the ridge poured lantern flames, bobbing like hungry eyes. Armor clanked. They found the outer path. Caspar hissed, "Help me rouse the guardians." He strode to a massive oak-shaped skeleton tree at the clearing's edge. Its trunk was braided from ankle bones of champions lost in wars before memory. Caspar placed his palm against its sternum knot and sang a chord so low, Mira felt it rather than heard it. The tree shuddered, blossoms shattered, swirling into the air like snow. Out of the trunk stepped 3 figures formed of condensed moonlight, warrior spirits wearing breastplates wrought of void. They knelt before Caspar, awaiting command. "Hold the Remans until the eclipse," he rasped. "Then guide them to forgetfulness." The guardians vanished in a hush of petals, racing toward the ridge. Mira's stomach tightened. "How long until total red?" she asked. Caspar lifted his gaze. The sun had already dimmed behind a sickly haze, and the moon, swollen and rusty, clawed its edge. "An hour, maybe less. I must mend the resonance well. You," he pointed the glowing tibia at her, "must gather the seed bones." Every century, while the blood eclipse bathed the valley, the orchard produced crystal seeds, tiny spheres of fused dust and memory that later sprouted new skeleton groves across scattered settlements. Without them, ancestral lines withered. With them, identity endured. Mira had volunteered long ago to be the seed-bearer, but the Empire's arrival forced her flight before her oath could be claimed. Now the task returned. She tied a bone-lace pouch to her belt and darted into the labyrinth. Petals drifted like lanterns with each skeletal trunk she passed. She pressed her ear to ovate hollows and, if she heard the chime of gestating seeds, sliced open the blossom with her sickle's blunt backside. One by one, opaline beads rolled into her palm, warm as living hearts. She thanked every ancestor by name. Elder Valen, Midwife Roa, Trickster Kesh, who once stole the governor's crown and planted it upside down in the mayor's garden. Prek! But his names tasted of ember and honey, yet beneath the gratitude, dread simmered. War horns boomed closer now. Echoes of clashing steel rippled through the orchard, but no soldier had breached the inner lanes yet. She prayed the guardians were enough. She thought of her mother's tree, of the new sapling's tender stem. She doubled her pace. The sky bruised toward totality. The moon's umbral shadows spread like ink over parchment, and when only a blood-red ring remained, the orchard breathed as a single being. Every bone trunk creaked. Blooms burst forth in cascades of scarlet, indigo, emerald flame. The air filled with music, a choir of ribs vibrating, of tendons tight as lute strings, strummed by invisible hands. In the fevered light, Mira's own flesh seemed translucent, and she swore she could see her skeleton dancing beneath. She reached the heart of the orchard, a circular courtyard where 12 monumental trees formed a crown. In its center lay the resonance well, an ancient pool ringed by vertebrae, surface black as forgotten ink. On eclipses past, Caspar would pour marrow water into the well to amplify the orchard's lullaby, guiding spirits back to rest at eventide. But the pool now flickered unrestful, ripples wobbling like shattered glass. Caspar knelt beside it, face pale. A gash split his cloak. Blood darkened his sleeve. "Caretaker!" Mira cried, dropping to him. "They broke through arches with fire salt." His breath rasped. "Guardians have scattered them for now, but their alchemist-born poisoned the well." He gestured to the water, where a luminous foulness pulsed. Emerald strands spiraling like serpents. "If we don't cleanse it, the orchard will roar awake, uncontrolled. It will march from its roots and tear the valley apart. The Emperor hopes for this chaos. He'll harvest the bones afterward. Myra felt despair tug, but resolve wound tighter. She raised the pouch of seeds. If I drop these into the well? Caspar shook his head. The seeds are unshaped potential. They would drink the poison, spawn blighted groves. No, we need the heart. Myra's pulse stilled. The heart petal grew only once in 10 eclipses, blooming at the crown of a single chosen ancestor. It could purge disease, mend ruptured songs, even call a soul back from oblivion, at a price. That price was permanence. The tree that yielded its heart petal would be emptied, its spirit untethered forever. A true death. She gazed around the crown of 12 monumental trees, seeking the glow that marked the destined bloom. Then she saw it. Atop the dancer-shaped tree, her mother's. A solitary flower larger than a fist, petals iridescent gold edged in blood crimson, pulsing with life. Caspar followed her gaze. Understanding dawned in his weary eyes. Nereus always was generous. Tears blurred Myra's sight, but she wiped them away with fury. Tell me what to do. Climb. Cut it clean. Hurry. She sheathed the sickle and scrambled up the tree's ribbed trunk. The bone was warm, humming like a harp string. Memories jolted into her. Mother braiding her hair, scolding her to eat, teaching her to carve whistles from elder reed. With every grip, Myra felt a plea. Don't. She almost hesitated. But below, Caspar coughed, and the pond hissed with corrupt vigor. She climbed. Of the canopy, she perched on a clavicle branch. The heart petal throbbed inches from her face, fragrance thick with summer peaches. She drew the sickle. Forgive me, she whispered, and sliced. White sap gushed, hot as tears. The tree shuddered. A sigh spiraled through the orchard. Leaves of bone rattled and distant trunks echoed that quiver, news traveling like lightning from body to body. Nereus is leaving. Myra cradled the heart petal, slid down and knelt by Caspar. Already the dancer tree dimmed, blossoms falling away like ash. Myra ignored the hollow in her chest, looked to the caretaker. He guided her hands to sink the heart petal into the well. The moment it touched the black water, radiance speared outward. A crimson plume surged skyward, then folded back like wings to blanket the orchard. Poison threads sizzled into harmless steam. The resonance melody steadied, deeper now, tinged with bittersweet minor chords, as though honoring Nereus's final gift. Caspar slumped, relief loosening his shoulders. It is done. But from the northern row came a scream of rage. Through blossoms and bone arches stormed Vaughan the alchemist, clad in scaled mail, eyes ringed with soot. In his gauntleted fist, he brandished a chain sickle that crackled with violet sparks. Behind him staggered surviving Riemann soldiers, armor dented by spectral blows. They saw their prize. The pond once poisoned, now purified, and redoubled their fury. Myra rose, sickle raised. Caspar struggled to his feet beside her. They still believe they can claim us, he muttered. We'll show them they are wrong. The orchard, sensing assault, awakened defense. From hollows within trunks, marrow-wrought roots burst forth, snaring ankles, yet Vaughan swung his electrified chain, severing bone tendrils. He hurled a glass orb that detonated in emerald fire, scorching a path. Myra met him halfway, copper blade ringing against chain steel. He was stronger, trained, but she had the orchard. At every parry she angled her opponent near skeletal trunks which bent, jointing into walls. Blossoms sprayed like shrapnel, slicing exposed skin. Still Vaughan pressed. Your orchard will serve Remen thralls, he spat. Will graft emperors everlasting. He flicked his chain, lightning arced, striking Caspar in the chest, sending him sprawling. Myra screamed and charged, but the alchemist sidestepped. He yanked her by hair, thrust her to the ground and raised his blade to sever her arm. Suddenly, the sapling, the little child tree, erupted from the clearing's edge, trunk elongating impossibly. It wrapped fragile barkbone limbs around Vaughan's shoulders. The alchemist cursed, slashing, yet the sapling held, bleeding amber. Its single blossom glowed like dawn. "Remember the songs," Mira whispered, and the sapling's grip tightened. Seizing the moment, Mira drove her sickle through Vaughan's throat. For an instant he staggered, eyes wide in disbelief, then collapsed. The sapling released him gently, like discarding a nightmare. The remaining soldiers saw their commander fall, and their nerve failed. The guardians of moonlight herded them toward the valley's mouth, where eclipsed darkness still loomed. Soon only rustling petals remained. Mira knelt by Caspar. The bolt had scorched his chest, but he breathed. She pressed a blossom soaked in her mother's sap to his wound. It hissed, knitting skin as if time rewound. He opened his eyes, managed a weak smile. "Your mother still heals," he whispered. An hour later, the blood eclipse waned towards silver. The orchard, satiated, eased into hush. But Mira could not quiet her heart. She stood before the dancer tree, now brittle and empty. Where once petals shimmered, only naked bone lingered, dulled. Guilt stabbed her. "I killed her twice," she choked. Caspar limped beside her. "You gave her a second death with purpose. Every ancestor will sing it," he pointed toward the sapling. "See." The child tree's single blossom had multiplied. 5 buds opening, colors shifting, a sign of mentorship. Her mother's essence, released into the orchard's currents, had guided the sapling's growth. Mira placed her palm on the empty trunk. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, from her pouch, she withdrew the seed bones she had gathered. She scattered them around the tree's roots. Each seed burrowed into loam, glimmering like stars sinking into ocean. New life for lost life. Dawn seeped over the eastern ridge. Far off, cries of retreating soldiers faded. The river Chorus, silent for 7 years, suddenly bellowed a single thunderous note as if awakened by the orchard's restored heartbeat. Water churned through cracked beds, reflecting sunrise like molten glass. Birds returned in startled flocks. Life pivoted. Caspar watched the river's resurrection with awe. The orchard's power reached wider than we knew. Mira inhaled the scented wind. For the first time, she felt no urge to run. "We must guard it," she said. "We?" His brow lifted. "I'll stay," she decided, voice steady. "As caretaker, if the orchard will have me." Bone branches nearby rustled, a sound like distant applause. Caspar chuckled hoarsely. "He agrees." He placed the tibia-tipped staff in her hands. "Then let the grey-wing line keep watch another millennium." She took the staff's weight, feeling it pulse with marrow music. The orchard's song wove through her bones, anchoring her to earth and sky alike. She gazed across rows of skeletal guardians bathed in pale dawn, each tree blossoming with histories and hopes. Under the retreating shadow of eclipse, the valley glowed luminous, like the memory of fire captured in crystal. Mira knew hardship would return. Empires rarely accepted defeat, and seeds of greed sprouted faster than any flower. But she also knew the orchard was no longer passive land. It was kin, armed with memory and bone, guided by her mother's final heartbeat and the brave sapling's first. Together they would stand, bloom after bloom, eclipse after eclipse, teaching every invader the simple truth the ancestors kept, that death, when rooted in love, grows unbreakable. She lifted the staff, and the orchard echoed the gesture. 1,000 skeletal limbs arced to the sky, blossoms unfurling in unified salute. Overhead, the last sliver of blood moon slipped behind silver, and daylight poured like absolution upon fields of bone transformed into living cathedral. Under that emerging sun, Mira Greywing took her first step as caretaker, seeds safe at her hip, a song blooming behind her teeth, and the bone orchard watched, ever flowering, ever vigilant, forever awake.